A reading from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 19, verses 25 to 27. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. It might seem strange that on Mothering Sunday we read the crucifixion story, but the extract we heard from John's Gospel is an obvious choice because it includes the words of Jesus to his mother and the disciple whom he loved, thought to be the Gospel writer himself. It's also a natural choice of reading because in Lent our hearts and minds turn towards Holy Week and the cross of Good Friday. If ever there was an evocation of the pain of sacrifice, it is the figure of Mary at the foot of the cross, representing every mother who has lost a child and also every mother, because to conceive and give birth and raise a child and then see them grow up and move on requires a self-giving that only mothers know, a familial, instinctive affection that follows a son or daughter even when fearing for the consequences and even to the bitter end. If these are sombre thoughts, they seem more so in the light of the corona pandemic, which forces us not to meet and me to make this broadcast to you. Self-isolation and social distancing are going to test the bonds of family relationships in the coming weeks, let alone of local communities and wider society. We're aware of an outpouring of offers of help and willingness to reach out figuratively, if not physically, to support one another. But we also know that this crisis is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And we must ensure that initial enthusiasm does not give way to fatigue. This is particularly true in these early weeks when apparently there might not be many outward developments. The experience in other countries has been after a quiet, phony war period, suddenly there is a rapid rise in cases, and those are the moments when our offers for help and systems for assistance will be tested. The steps we are taking to strengthen bonds in our church community through the establishment of a telephone tree, the production of a prayer booklet and a regular weekly bulletin with information, encouragement, readings and prayers for each Sunday. Our WhatsApp High Heaton Help grows, Our WhatsApp High Heaton Helps group sits alongside the local COVID-19 Facebook support group. Let me know if you'd like to join either of these and can't find them. This week also, children will not be at school, which is going to test the bonds of family life, especially for working parents, as well as those caring for elderly and vulnerable relatives. When Jesus spoke to his mother from the cross, he commended her to his friends, saying, "Woman, behold your son." And to the friend he commended her, "Behold your mother." At this moment of sacrifice, Jesus places people into new relationships with each other. Those not related by birth or kin are suddenly as parent and child one to another, with all the assurance and responsibility that this kind of relationship demands. It means that in Christ we are never isolated. We are always part of something bigger. The figure of the crucified Christ also reminds us that whilst we witness the painful death of a beloved one, we know that through the resurrection, that death is not the end of the story. And so there is hope amongst us that means we do not need to be afraid. Indeed, it is that hope which is the inspiration for the acts of love and self-sacrifice that characterise Christian life, and to which we are called at all times already, but perhaps especially in times such as this. Thus, as well as taking care of our own loved ones, we see people reaching out to neighbours and strangers, remembering to check and ensure that people have all that they need, that they are not feeling too much the pain of separation, and have an opportunity to share resources. A greater challenge is how we do this as a society, ensuring that there remains enough food for everyone, that livelihoods that are affected by the economic downturn are preserved, and that we do all that we can to ensure that the infection does not spread. In his novel La Peste, The Plague, 1947, Albert Camus describes the citizens of a town in northern Africa beset by the bubonic plague in his own time. He writes about the phenomenon of people not quite believing in the pestilence, describing them as humanists, carrying on as if everything was normal, thinking only of themselves, and not realising that if they did not believe in the plague, there would be no future. Here is the mystery. We have to accept the most difficult challenge to our nature, death itself, if we are to have an inkling of the possibility of what life is really for. When we consider the ultimate moment, our acceptance is what transforms the quality of ourself, and therefore of our relationships with one another. Suddenly, we are no longer thinking of ourselves and beginning to think of others as if they were our mothers or our sons, generations brought together in Christ. This is something we strive to create as part of our fellowship here at St. Francis Church, and it's a model of thinking and believing and living which I commend to people everywhere. In Christ, in adversity, we are brought into new relationships with one another and held together in him. St. Francis was constantly transfixed by the figure of the crucified Christ. He longed to feel the pain of Christ's wounds so that he could feel the sweetness of God's love for humanity, a love which he reflected for all God's creatures, and especially for the poorest and the least. I finish with his blessing for Brother Leo. The Lord bless you and keep you. May he show his face to you and have mercy. May he turn his countenance to you and give you peace. The Lord bless you. Amen.